my attitude problem, and hopefully you can take something from that. I'm going to ask you what your strategies are as well. This is really interesting. I'm getting comments on the live feed, which means y'all are there, but it says I have 0 people watching in my counter. So welcome to the live stream, Janet, Kiriaki, and One Step Closer. Guys, if you have questions as we go, just put the first few words in all caps, and then I'll know that you want me to address those. Okay, so before we hop into that, I want to talk about our featured event of today's show, and that's the Back to the Land Festival. Back to the Land Festival is a homesteader-focused conference, September 22nd through 23rd in Centerville. And it's run by Matt and Gabby Hundley, who do a great job of, showing hands-on, like how to milk cows and stuff like that. They've got demonstrators, great vendors, great presentations, and they have a buy one, get one free ticket deal that launched today. So go to backtothelandfestival.com to check that out. It starts again Friday, September 22nd, and Sunday. And they've got Sophia Wynn, multi-general homesteading. We've got Ann Aceta Scott, Old World Food Preservation Methods. Adam Martin, Natural and Sustainable Beekeeping. William Bond, Compost Like Jeff Lawton. Janelle Anderson, How to Start Your Homestead. Lizzie Engler, Rabbits on the Homestead. Tina Clark and Kitty Richards, Building a Homestead Community. And Brooke Arison, Nourishing Homestead Meals. I think you guys will like it if you're in the area, so definitely check that out. If you want to make a trip of it, you can go to that, and then you can go up to Kansas to the Midwest Preparedness Project, and then come back down for SRF. Anyway, I think you'll really like this event if you head out to it. That's backtothelandfestival.com to find out more. I also want to thank our show sponsors today, and the first one is, I chose these sponsors very carefully based on our topic. Agorist Tax Advice. Matthew Sursley over at agoristaxadvice.com knows a thing or two about how to track your finances, how to structure your business so that you are set up to take advantage of the tax code, and you can pay him for a consultation to just analyze your situation, and then he can give you some recommendations about how to structure your businesses, what write-offs are possible, how to track those so you don't get in trouble, risks associated with that. Anybody who's in business should be thinking about working with somebody like Matthew. And he has good knowledge in real estate, rentals, end-of-life planning, general business practices, those sorts of things. So definitely somebody you'll want to reach out to if you have not really thought about how your business is structured. That's over at agoristaxadvice.com. And here's what I like about Matthew. He doesn't want to charge you money if he doesn't think he can help you. So if you go to agoristaxadvice.com/LFTN, then you can schedule a free consultation. It's a short call where Matthew can ask you some questions to see if it's a good fit. And if it's not, he'll let you know. Second sponsor of today's show is John Pugliano of the Wealth Studying Podcast. John Pugliano is, he's a self-made millionaire. He's going to be talking about how to become a millionaire the slow, hard way at the Self-Reliance Festival. And that's kind of cool because that's tends to be more successful than the other approach, the get rich quick approach. And he's spent a lot of time thinking about money management. He loves money. And he has a podcast that just talks about how the world is influencing money decisions, what's going on in the economy, what he's doing, and it makes investing and money management an accessible concept, especially if you're new to it. I recommend go check out his podcast at investablewealth.com. Download it. They're 15 minutes long. He starts out way early on going over his principles of investing, and then from there it's just great episodes time after time after time. Really great dude, and he will also be at Self-Reliance Festival if you want to see him speak. Finally, if you have feedback about the show, you can send that to me, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. That's Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. Our live stream schedule this week. That's right. It's announcements. Tomorrow, 12:30, I'll be live with John Willis and Spags. So we'll have a really great conversation there. That's going to be on this YouTube channel and on the Special Operations Equipment YouTube channel. Thursday, 7:30, we're live for Self-Reliance Festival. Toolman Tim's coming on there, and I think John Athide might come on too. He's our scything demo guy. And then, of course, Friday, as usual, 10:30, we have the Homestead Happenings live stream. Okay, you ready for the first segment of today's show? I did all of that in 7 minutes and 16 seconds, just so you could get through it and get to the meat of this podcast. Tales from the Prepper Pantry. This is where we talk about storing what you use and using what you store. I've got somebody on here from the Mojave Desert. Yep. Need water. Yep. It's dry out there. I've spent some time in that desert. Anyway, I'm up to 64 and a half jars. So 64 and a half quarts of green beans are put up for the winter. The half quart is a pint. I did some pint jars because I had some this many jars and then half a jar of green beans left. And I thought, well, I might as well have some smaller jars because sometimes it's good to have smaller jars of things. I've got 20 jars of salsa as of last weekend. And those tomatoes have all come off of my land, or Rick, who was here at the meetup we had, brought me a big box of tomatoes that he had surplus. He actually just sent me a picture of all the green beans he's dehydrating today. It was like, wow, that looks really cool. That's his second harvest. So he's had a pretty successful garden this year. Anyway, so between that, we've got 20 jars of salsa. I've got 8 pints of tomato sauce I've added to the half case that I put up the other day. So we're doing pretty well on canned goods. I've got pickled beets, and not for my garden, though. I've got dilly beans. I've got pickle relish. I did not do dill pickles this year because I had so many left over from last year. And really, we've mostly been eating our cucumbers fresh. So the pantry's looking pretty good from a canned food goals standpoint. And greetings from sunny Northern California. And Ruth, both of you guys, welcome to the live stream. Life Done Free tag is in the room. Wow, we're having a good live today. It's really fun to see all y'all coming in here. And now I know my head count is completely off on this. It's still showing that there are 0 of you on the live stream, but I'm seeing your comments, so I know that you're there. It is a great day to be free. So with that in mind, I don't really need to can anything else except for I always can use more salsa, and if there are tomatoes, I'll do it. But I am continuing to can green beans if we have surplus from the garden, just because even if I get some jars that spill over into the next year, that's not the end of the world for us. Plus, it's just, if it's there, you might as well use it in your pantry if you can. There comes a point where you just have too much of something put up, and then you have to make that decision. But with green beans, if I have enough for 2 years put up this year, that's great, because then if green beans fail in my garden next year, I have them already. So that's just how I view that. In fact, I had leftover tomato sauce from last year. We're still using it. So the tomato sauce I'm putting up now, I'm probably not going to start tapping into that until midwinter. I also stopped. I used to buy pre-made spaghetti sauce, so it would be really easy to make. One of my I forgot to think about cooking meals is to take a frozen cauliflower pizza crust, throw sauce on it, throw some meat on it, throw some cheese on it, and have pizza night, right? And that's super easy with a pre-done jar of spaghetti sauce from the store. You just go glurp and you just put the stuff on it and then you're done. But I've decided, since I have a decent amount of tomato sauce put up, that I'm no longer going to have glurp jars of commercial spaghetti sauce. I'll just add basil and some other garlic and other delicious things like that. It doesn't take that much more time, and it just gets the meal out. Plus, we're using the things we grow here, which is the whole purpose of the lifestyle that I've chosen and that the people in the holler community have chosen, right? It's not to drink to eat commercial spaghetti sauce. Good. I'm just like the picture of drinking. Oh, I don't think I can do it. Anyway, we are also, as I mentioned last week, going through sort of what I call the tail ends of things in the freezer. I have one freezer where everything ends up when I'm like, oh, time to get that out of this freezer and use it up sooner. And so at the beginning of every week, I go in there and I grab out packages of meats that I can center meals around. We have a lot of seafood in there and other, like the bits and bobs of animals. And so I actually cooked the last 2 venison shins from my freezer. And if anybody knows this story, I was out of town 2 years ago. So not last November, but the November before. And while I was out of town, what happened is my neighbor shot a deer, and he tagged it and then asked if we wanted the carcass because he just keeps the antlers. And so my mother, Mama Sauce, was taking care of the hauler for me while I was out of town at Jack Spirko's. And it fell to her to cut up the animal. Now, we could have taken it to a processor, but then she was like, no, I'll cut it up into big hunks and then I'll throw it in the freezer for you. And if you want me to do anything beyond that, you're gonna have to call me and tell me what to do because I don't know. And my perspective is that even if you don't make the official butcher cuts, like if you cut things off at the joints and you have it hunked out, like I can defrost a piece later and make it into steaks or ground or whatever. But she labeled the bags, and since she doesn't necessarily know what the cuts are because she's been a vegetarian for much of her life, she's not vegetarian now, but she was, so she hasn't really thought about that. She just sort of called the parts whatever she wanted. And the first thing I saw when I got back was I think I had 4 deer shins. So just the front legs. And I saw the word shin and I just started cracking up. And then I started looking at how the other bags were labeled, and it was very entertaining. So I've cooked some of the deer shins, but today we put deer shins in a crock pot with tomatoes diced up from the garden. And I had a little bit of bone broth left over from last week's bone broth making adventure. And I slow cooked that today, and I took the meat off the bones and cut that up. And I added some what were labeled venison pieces, also from the same time, in there. And I put green beans from the garden, and I put Indian curry spice in there. So that's what's for dinner tonight. And it's just a simple crock pot meal. Those are such a lifesaver, I find, when it's really busy on the homestead, because it just kind of cooks itself. It doesn't take that much time. I started it this morning with the deer shins, and then I didn't even I threw an onion in there and nothing else. And then, at lunchtime, I took the shins out and let them cool while I was eating lunch, and then snapped the beans into there. That took about 5 minutes. And then I took the meat off and cut it up and put it in there. And then when we're done with this podcast, because it's Mondays, and Mondays are busy for me in the fall, we are getting ready for Christmas right now. You're like, Nicole, why are you bringing up Christmas? Because I sing in a choir. And so I get to sing Christmas carols at this time of year with the choirs, along with other things. We're preparing Vivaldi's Gloria for December performance. So I'm sure we're already starting in on that, as well as our fundraisers in October. So there'll be probably a song or two we learn from that. But that's the focus. So every Monday night, I'm going to zoom out of here after recording this and get my butt to town, sing in choir, and then I get home late, and then I'm all wired and can't sleep. And then Tuesday mornings for the fall and during choir time are always sort of oh, I got to get up. I was up so late last night. Yeah. So having something I can just glurp out of the crock pot today and eat it real quick and then drive to town is what I'm going to need, because I have about 45 minutes from ending this podcast to producing the audio to getting my rear end out the door. And that's just the schedule I've chosen for myself. If it becomes too hard, I'm going to move this live stream just maybe half an hour earlier, and I'll update the freestanding listing and all of that. Okay. The other thing that I took out last week was some turkey pieces, and they were kind of a weird shape. So I think it kind of looked like a turkey breast, but it had been cut in half or something. And I pulled that out, and I didn't really read what it was, and I put it in the fridge. And my plan was to do that trick where I coat it in baking powder with spices, which kind of makes the skin nice and crispy. And it's one of the ways I've found that I like poultry now that I have developed a distaste for poultry, which has been, for those of you who have listened for a long time, it's because since I had COVID, poultry tastes bad to me and I have to spice it up. Well, I found out if I crisp the skin and really seal the juices in, that makes a huge difference too, especially if there's a lot of garlic on the herbs on the skin. And so I pulled that out Saturday or Friday. It was Friday. No, Saturday. And I looked at it, and it turned out that the turkey was a rabbit. And that's how things go in my house sometimes, especially when it's really busy. Like it may sound weird that I don't know what I was going to cook that night, and then I cooked it anyway. But I cooked a rabbit on Saturday, and I roasted. Usually, I'll make a rabbit stew, or I'll do I'll take it and I'll make a wine sauce, and then I'll braise it slowly in that. It's really good that way. But I was a little pushed for time because I had been planning to cook turkey and I had everything lined up for that. And what I had was a rabbit. So I roasted it in the oven at 400 degrees I went 40 minutes. Next time I'll do 30. And before I did the roasting, I marinated it for an hour in Worcestershire sauce and soy sauce and a little bit of balsamic vinegar and then some spices. And I used rosemary, garlic, and black pepper. So super simple flavor profile. And took it out of the marinade, patted it dry, roasted it. And then I took it and I ended up with an air fryer. And it's because I needed to buy a pressure cooker. And I went online and found out that pressure cookers have, like, some of them you can pay a little bit more and you get the air fryer too. And I got a combination slow cooker, pressure cooker, air fryer with a stainless steel internal pot for one. So I'm testing the slow cooker out later this week. And if it works well, I'm going to toss my crock pot. Because the thing about cooking all the time and liking to use different kinds of appliances is you end up with too many appliances. And if this thing will replace that thing, then it's one thing that does three things instead of two things that do three things, right? So here's hoping that I can do that. But I finished it off in the air fryer and I learned two things. One, do not air fry rabbit to finish it off for 15 minutes. I ended up with, you know how like when you burn toast, you do that thing in the morning where you go to get the gritty stuff off? Yeah. The rabbit was kind of that way on the smaller pieces. So next time I'll just stop it at 7 minutes or 5 minutes and so it's crisp the skin. But it was delicious. It was still delicious once you got that part off. And it's my new favorite way to have rabbit. So next time I cook a rabbit, I'm going to try it that way again. And let's see, COVID. We're going to talk about, I guess I could have my video taken down because I said the C word, the koofus, but I don't care. There have been a lot of rumors. So this is related to the pantry. There have been a lot of rumors that shutdowns are coming. And so I've actually confirmed from one source that the TSA is planning to do masks and preparing for shutdowns. That's not enough for me to go all in on that, but let's just look at this analytically. Why wouldn't they try it? Why wouldn't they try it? That's the question I have to ask. It worked last time. We're going into an election year. It helps, the 2020 situation helped influence election outcomes. So why wouldn't they try it? And why wouldn't they use it as a way to usher in a CBDC or anything else they're looking to do? Because when you make people panicked and scared, it's easier to pass things. And a really great way to make people panicked and scared is a pandemic, right? So people have reached out to me worried about this. And I was sort of like, well, I haven't been able to verify anything. And I was focusing on writing my book last week. And I was able to verify a little bit. And then I sort of thought about like, what has government done in the past and why would it be any different? And so I think it's important to look at that and look economically at what's been going on and like the interest rates going up. And, at some point, the real estate market probably is going to crash. And we do have inflation through the roof by the official measures. And then when you look at the things that we actually buy, like we, the normal people actually buy, those are even higher, right? So there's movement going on. And some of this movement really mimics the 70s. In fact, I did a show probably 6 months ago now or 8 months ago now, talking about the strategies that worked for people who went through the inflationary time of the 70s and 80s, because my parents were just trying to start out and make it in life at that time. And all of that is to say, if you let fear drive your decisions right now because you're worried that there might be shutdowns, or you're worried that the thing they're worried about might actually be a deadly illness, or you're worried about a real estate crash, or any of these other things that are going on, and you're not able to bring yourself out of that, the likelihood that you're going to take actions that are not in your best interest is high. And so my thought is this: we have rumors that shutdowns might be coming. And on the other hand, we also have an indication of a populist movement that spans both sides of the political spectrum, of people who are sick of the elite pulling strings, and they can see that the control is happening from the top down, and they don't like it. And they don't like the impact on their own life. And if you look at the song Richmond North of Richmond, which really has hit a chord not only in the United States, but worldwide. I mean, we have a song that's gone to #1 on iTunes here and then worldwide because it's striking a chord. And if you look at the content of that song, I don't read it as conservative or liberal or Democrat or Republican. And there's a lot of people out there doing commentary saying, it's definitely pro-Republican and white supremacist, or it's definitely all liberal, or whatever. It's pro-union, whatever it is. There's a lot of people arguing about it, and there are a lot of people not. What I'm seeing more is people from many different walks of life, from many different perspectives, listening to the song and going, yeah, that person gets it. That person gets it. And I think when you see that, and when you see a message like that, that is penetrating different political spectrums, different income levels, different kinds of people with different kinds of interests, there is a deeper message there about the perspective of society around us, or the zeitgeist, or the opinion of our time. And for me, that gives me great hope, because the song to me is inciting unity, not division. It's sort of pointing out, like, yeah, we see through how you're trying to divide us, but we all have similar concerns. We all are not liking what we see. And while some people who are very vocal may be screaming about what it means, I also have spent some time watching what the person who wrote the song had to say about it. And he has not come out and said this is a liberal anthem, or this is racist, or this is a conservative anthem. Quite the opposite. He has couched it in bigger terms, like it's a bigger message than that, right? And to me, that tells me, or, like the way people have responded to that, it tells me that there is a much bigger silent majority that's done. So when I hear the rumors of the shutdowns and those things, do I think some of that can happen? Yeah. Do I think we are better positioned to navigate that without completely losing it? Yes. Am I sure that'll happen? Absolutely not. People go along to get along, guys. But you and I can just not participate in their crazy. We do not have to participate in their crazy. We have spent the last 3 years developing better relationships, becoming healthier people mentally and physically, building more resilience into our lives so that we can take care of ourselves and those around us, and making connections with each other, real in-person connect. This is why I do Self-Reliance Festival. It's not because it makes me rich. This is why I do the spring workshop. This is why I have been out speaking at multiple events, even when it meant I was away from home way more than I should have been this year. And Tactical had to do way more than his fair share of the work on the homestead. It's so that we can connect, because we being able to work together to be strong and help each other through when we don't comply with things that we shouldn't have to comply with, that's the strength. And that's why we need to keep working on our own health. And we need to really invest the time in our relationships. And we need to be willing to reach a hand out when people need it. We need to be able to help each other, work together, and connect each other. And I think we are there. I think we can get stronger. I think we can be better, but I think we are there. And so when I see this, I'm like, I'm not scared. Life might change. Some things may change if this comes through, but what I can do right now is what I do about this time every year. Look at the supplies in my pantry going into winter and say, have I slid on some of my best practices of, load from the back, take from the front, and keeping sort of a number of months of supplies on hand so that I don't have to rush to the grocery store for one thing? And have I thought about what I'll do if I can't buy sugar? I'm not going to worry about sugar, but or whatever it is, cat food. Cat food's a big one. My cats like to eat. Have I thought about what else I can do or who I can reach out to? That to me seems like a much more reasoned response to that. And so we are doing that right now. Like, I'm making sure my propane tanks are topped off, and I'm looking at the pantry saying, how has my life changed since last time I did this? Right? So that's the long explanation of, hey, I need to audit my pantry. And Rachel says we need another pantry webinar. Rachel, email me about that, because I will do another Power Pantry webinar this fall. I'm happy to do it if y'all are interested in it. I want to know, for those of you who already went through the Power Pantry webinar with me, what other things do you want me to cover? Or is it that you just sort of want a refresher? Because I have actually changed some things about how I do pantry management since then. But, it does cover the basics. So if there's something beyond what we covered you want to see in there, let me know, Nicole at livingfreeintennessee.com. Next up, we have the shopping report from Joe. Joe says, at the Dollar Tree, one drink cooler is still out of order. Apparently, they're not going to report, but they're not going to repair that, Joe. It's been 4 weeks, maybe longer. Otherwise, but the others are mostly full. There's no Venom left, so I hope they get more. They do have brewed tea in stock. Other stock looks good too, and the store was busy enough that a second line was open. We skipped Home Depot, but I checked online. The price of a 2x4x8 was $3.68. Rachel says she'll hit me up on the mastermind group. Great. Aldi was last. We found most of what we wanted except for cherries and dark chocolate. They had other varieties, which I skipped. They did have heavy cream back in stock. Staple prices are milk, $2.78 for a gallon. Eggs, $1.06 for a dozen. Heavy cream, $4.69 for a quart. OJ, $3.19 for, I don't know what size that one is. Butter, $3.19 for a pound. Bacon, $3.99 for a pound. Sugar, $3.09 for a bag. I think it's a 5-pound bag, but I'm not sure. It might be a 2-pound bag. Flour, $2.19. I'll look at the size on that next time I'm at Aldi. I may need to add potatoes. Sonia said this is the first time they were over $6 for a bag. They've been under $5 and even under $4. Potatoes are usually cheap. However, potato season has not started yet. Potato season is about to start, though, and they're going to get cheap in about a month. So I don't know why it went up. Untainted regular gasoline remains $3.89 a gallon. A side effect of having a rental car was that I got to see tainted gasoline is $3.39 a gallon. Next up, we have a frugality tip, and this one comes from you, Janet. I know that you are in the live stream today. Jay says, save your 8.5 by 11 sheets of paper that you make mistakes on, like when you're printing. And when you have a large stack of them, you can take it to a copy shop and have them turn it into small notepads for you. It's a way to save money on notepads. Next up, we have Operation Independence. This is where I talk about building local ongoing revenue into our lives, as well as learning things and choosing how to repair things on our own. So we don't have to pay a guy, because if we don't have to pay a guy, we don't have to earn 30% more, pay taxes, and then pay that guy who then pays 30% taxes and then pays a guy for something else that they pay 30% taxes on. It's like a pyramid scheme. Anyway, so today's whole show is basically an Operation Independence topic, and it's about tracking your finances and doing other analytical, clerical things as a creative. So I'm not going to go into anything else because the show topic is Operation Independence, guys. I didn't have anything else to do that. Anyway, creative struggles in business. I don't know if you know this, but I am a creative. If you were going to define if I'm analytical or creative, I'm creative. I can analyze things and I can be analytical about things, but it's almost always motivated by a creative pursuit, right? So, like I'll measure the size of the wool that I spin to see what size it is, right? How narrow it is or how skinny it is. Actually, I haven't started doing that, but I will eventually. Because for me, that's a scale by which I can improve the quality of what I'm doing, and I can set goals with that. And I am a goal-driven person as well. But as a creative, and a messy creative, it's running my own business has things about it that are not my favorite. In fact, the job I left before I went all on my own for Living Free in Tennessee and Hollow Roast Coffee was the founder and president of a 501c nonprofit, a 501c3 nonprofit organization. I started that organization. We were mission driven. I'm a mission driven person. And the mission I was working on, I believed in. I am still working on that mission through Living Free in Tennessee, through the Self-Reliance Festival, and through Hollow Roast Coffee, by the way. So it's just I'm not doing it as a 501c3. And the problem with my job at the 501c3 is that we provided a service that required the energy of a creative. And I needed to raise money for that from donors who were not my customer. They weren't the people I was helping. So like you end up in this weird double customer situation where it's kind of like health insurance, right? You get the money from these people. You need to make them happy to get the money from them. And then you use the money to help these people. You have to convince them that they want to take advantage of your help. And so you're basically marketing to two sets of people as your primary target. And what makes the people financing you happy may be very different than what makes the people who are using your services happy. Health insurance is the same way, right? You have a job. Your employer pays the insurance company to give you health coverage. So they have to make your employer happy by keeping costs under control. And then they don't actually really need to keep you all that happy to give you the services because you're going to get what you get. If you want, that's one of the many problems with our healthcare system is that we have set up a situation where the person who is the customer of the service is not the patient. And if we had patient-driven care, some things would change. Now, we do have some examples of patient-driven care, but we're going to do a whole episode on healthcare. I can feel it coming. Because that's another frustration of a creative business owner is that I also need to access care sometimes when I'm sick. And that's super not fun in this country. Super not fun. So I struck a chord over the weekend, and the post was actually on Facebook, and I just gave an update. And the reason I gave this update on Facebook is that I needed to hold myself accountable, which is a strategy I use when I am when I need to be productive. There's a couple things I do to make myself productive when I have an attitude problem, and I can guarantee you I have a big attitude problem about bookkeeping. And I need to file my business taxes for Nicole Sauce Industries by September 15th. And the whole year I have been stuck behind, this is for 2022. the whole year I've been stuck behind trying to use a bookkeeping software package instead of what I refer to as my Uber spreadsheet to do the bookkeeping, because I know that it will, when deployed right, make my life easier. It's a better way to communicate with my CPA. And I want to be able to use these tools to analyze some impacts of decisions we're making on the budget of my business, which, having worked with QuickBooks since the 90s, when I was working with QuickBooks at a startup company, I just went that direction because I was like, well, I already used to use that. I've used it in multiple companies. And it's really nice to be able to pull reports and be like, here's your profit and loss report. Boom, done. And I don't have to do a lot of crazy things. It just pulls the report and I look at it and I'm like, uh-oh, or cool, right? And that helps you make longer term decisions. Well, QuickBooks Online has just, the native desktop version that used to exist was great. And the online version, it's like, I want to scratch my own eyeballs out and throw them on the ground and jump up and down on them more than I want to mess with that system anymore. And I paid somebody to set it up for me so that it would have all the codes in place. And she was awesome and did all these videos on how to use it. And I'm like, I am not going to do that every month. I am not it was really too much for me. So I finally was like, I have now sentenced myself to doing the Uber spreadsheet again. And every year the business grows, and every year things become a little bit more complex because we grow. And every year the Uber spreadsheet gets more Uber. It just becomes more Uber. And I'm a creative and I hate it. I hate it. I had a job once where an industrial psychologist came in and they analyze a whole bunch of different things about you. And basically you end up with this report saying the things that you're best at versus not best at, things that you're passionate about versus not passionate about. And I don't mean like coffee. I mean I'm more of a big picture to detail thinker. That's the direction I go. I have a tendency to do well keeping a handle on multiple things at one time and taking one thing down and doing it and then putting it back up there when I run into a land block. It's going to take some time, and taking another thing down so I can switch from one focus to another pretty well and keep track of multiple things at one time. Not really at one. I can't really multitask. I'm just good at changing where I go. And Janet says QuickBooks Online is the devil's spawn. 100% agree with you. 100% agree with you on that one. And one of the things it looks at is if you're more of a clerically oriented person. Some people love doing clerical. I know somebody who listens to my podcast who loves doing clerical, loves spreadsheets, just loves all of those details and putting them together, and the beauty that comes when it's all right and you can query that spreadsheet for information. She loves it. I hates it. I scored a 4 out of 100 on that particular clerical thing. And what the industrial psychologist told me is it's when people score low in an area, it's best for them to pursue jobs that aren't focused in that area. When you're below 10 in an area, you actually find it distasteful. And she was not wrong. She was not wrong. So when I posted this post, I got way more engagement than I have over the past few months on a lot of different, more controversial things. And I had people reaching out to me with advice of systems to try. I actually had tried by the end of Saturday, FreshBooks and Xero. Xero is spelled Xero. And I have tried both of those before and just quite didn't get off the runway with them. And the other thing that I got a lot of was people I'm so excited to see where this takes you because I have the same problem, Nicole. So as a creative, let's talk about what this problem is. It's that I'm creative and I think big picture first, then details. And most people who design bookkeeping software think details to get to the big picture. So we're starting out with I go the other direction. I am also numbers dyslexic, which luckily I didn't have any like special accommodations in school for that, because I have learned to estimate the results of mathematical equations really well, because I have to, because when I switch two numbers, the answer ends up wrong. And I can usually be like, hey, I kind of thought we'd be around this number, and this is a totally different number. And I'm going to have to go back and see what BS I pulled on myself and figure that out, right? So those two things make the entire trek into bookkeeping software really distasteful for me and something I don't like to do. But also as a creative, I think if I would be screened for it, by the way, I would be diagnosed with ADHD. And they tried to do that in third grade, and Mama Sauce said no. So thank you, Mama Sauce, because I also learned how to deal with life without special accommodations for being ADHD, which was great. As a creative, I also am not motivated by the details. I am motivated by creating things, right? I am motivated by starting things. I am motivated by figuring out the answers to problems that nobody even knew existed. I am motivated by a lot of different things. I need to physically interact with the world in order to process information, which means, and by physically, I don't mean like typity type into a spreadsheet. I mean like the reason spinning for me is so awesome is I am touching the fiber and spinning it. The reason music works for me so well is my whole body has to work to produce an emotional and analytical thing that is music, right? So that's how I interact with the world. And a lot of creatives interact with the world this way. When I have a decision to make that's big, the first thing I take stock of is what's my first instinct say to me? How do I feel about this? Why do I feel that way? And then I go into the, how much is it going to cost? How would this work? I mean, I don't not put the logical in, but I totally start with a non-logical approach before I start getting logical. And sometimes the logical makes it so I don't buy the endless pool right the minute I want it. But we all know I'm going to get one of those. We don't know what brand it's going to be. We don't know on what timeline it's going to be. But we know Nicole Sauce has prioritized that in her life, right? You've heard me talk about this before. So I really started thinking about like other creatives and why they're so interested in seeing the bookkeeping software. The best bookkeeping experience I ever had was an app on my phone that did two things. It would send me, it would analyze my statements. And when I spent money with my business card, it would say, hey, I noticed you spent $12.95 at Joe's Chinese restaurant. Was this a business expense? And I'd be like, yeah. Was it meals? And I'd say, yeah. What project were you working on? And I'd say, Self-Reliance Festival. And then it would aggregate all of that. The reason I stopped using that is it was developed for a sole proprietor who has not taken the step of separating their business bank account from their personal. So it was just sort of, the idea was it would separate your personal from your business expenses. And I was beyond that at that point. In addition to which, I do track information across 3 business units in my business so that I know, is Self-Reliance Festival profitable or not? Is Holler Roast Coffee profitable or not? And is the Living Free in Tennessee, which is podcast events at the Holler and all of that, is that profitable or not? But it was because it proactively reached out to me in a way I like to communicate, and it just asked me some questions and figured it out that worked for me. And so when I did QuickBooks Online and I learned that you can create rules, and it learns like every time the electric bill comes in, guess what? That's utilities for Holler Roast Coffee. Like, boom, done. That's 12 charges a year that I don't have to touch because it knows. When I learned that was possible, I was like, this is great. It's going to totally revolutionize my life, so I can focus in once a month on, tagging what kind of expense things are. And I don't have to do everything all the time over and over and over and over again because I already know and I don't need to. The creative in me does not like the repetition, right? So the challenge I see as a creative in business is I know in my head and in my heart that tracking the details of my business gives me critical feedback from which I can make better decisions, right? I know that. And because I know that, and I hates it. I hates doing it. The struggle is I have to make myself do it. But I really want the critical feedback. And I have even worked in environments where I didn't have to do that and I could just get the reports and somebody else who loves it did it. And that was so awesome. That was so great. It was a much bigger company than I have, though. And that's why there was somebody dedicated to that. The second thing that's like a struggle for a creative is bookkeeping and tax codes are freaking complex. This is why Agorist tax advice is somebody who's going to be hearing from me this year, right? Because once I have this all, then I can communicate with him and he can look at it and see if I'm doing some things that don't need to be done or could be done more simply or could be done better, right? They are unnecessarily complex. They are unnecessarily complex because of how our government structures the tax code to benefit the elite at the expense of everybody else. It's the way the system is here. Knowing that doesn't fix it, though. But because of that complexity, and because the kind of people who track that kind of complexity tend to be details first, then big picture people, and creatives tend to be big picture, then details people, the tools that are being developed to make this easier, make it easier for one kind of person, and it ain't you and me if you are a creative. It just isn't. Then let's go number third. And I keep talking about business finance, and that's not the only frustration in business, but boy, is it a big center of almost all things. Oh, filing all the dang papers at the state level is also not fun every year, but at least it's like one bad day and then it's done. There's a lot of high pressure that you can take on emotionally about doing it wrong. This is what keeps most people who are afraid of everything from starting their business to begin with, because they're like, I'm going to do it wrong and I'm going to get fined or go to jail or audited and I can't handle that. Okay. If you do it wrong, there can be really bad outcomes, guys. And putting that kind of pressure on yourself makes it harder to overcome attitude problems from a creative standpoint of just grin and bear it, get through it, and realize that I'm doing this kind of like the same way I scrub my toilet once a week so that I have a clean toilet because I like having a clean toilet. I don't like cleaning toilets. Don't like doing bookkeeping. They're kind of on par with each other. Toilets are cleaner faster than bookkeeping is, but they're the same kind of thing for me. I like having the clean toilet. Don't like bookkeeping, but I like having the financial insights and reports. It is how it is, right? It is what it is. Well, when you get into the reality of the fines and the audits and the jail time related to doing it wrong, if you're putting your best effort in and you do the best you can and you make a mistake and they figure out you made a mistake, what they usually do is they send you a letter and they say, you didn't file this report. You filed this report wrong. We've noticed that this thing isn't right, blah, blah, blah. This is what you need to do to remedy it or you'll get fined. Sometimes they say, whoops, you underpaid us by so much that we're going to fine you. And the fine is like 4%. It's not that much. So usually the first line of attack from the you screwed up people is to give you notice that you screwed up and tell you how to fix it. And so unless you're talking scales of millions of dollars of like, it looks like you embezzled or fraudulently reported, your risk is not as high as you think it is. And if you pair that with working with a CPA, getting advice from people like Matthew Sursley of Agorist Tax Advice, if you pair it with that, you're even less likely to have set yourself up in a way to make big mistakes. The biggest mistakes come when we don't track things as we go, because then we forget what things are for, and then we can't take those tax write-offs because we can't properly document it. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's lots of incentives as a creative to get past myself on the cleaning the toilet factor of bookkeeping. And then the last thing that I see as challenges in business for creatives is finish. If you follow me on social, you saw yesterday I went around and I just started taking video of all the projects I haven't finished in my house related to homesteading. I have seeds that I have saved that need to be put in bags. I had a dish, like a sink full of clean dishes that needed to be put away. I had tomatoes to process. I had, I don't know, I think seeds to put away I had all this stuff that just isn't done because it's high season in the homestead where all the stuff is coming off the garden and it's time to plant the fall garden. And I got to get ready for spring next year. So I got to save my seeds, and I make a big mess when I can stuff, right? And that, like I literally did all my dishes twice yesterday, I'm pretty sure, as a result of making tomato things. So it's really easy as a creative to start stuff. It's not always easy to finish stuff because you get almost all the way to the end and then the excitement of the project wears off. And then you're like, it doesn't have to be done. You know how that is? I know you know how that is. And other times you love finishing, right? So it's not like it's all the time. But when you bring that it's gotten boring, so I don't want to finish it factor into a business, it's problematic, because if it was really fun to do the event, but it's not fun to write and send the checks to the people who spoke for you, you end up paying people late and they get mad at you. Very tangible example there. And that's something I have done, because when it gets to the point where I take the checkbook, which, see, my account numbers on the side you can't see. When I take my checkbook and I write the check, it requires me to take my pen and write it, and then to put it in an envelope. But your address, what's your address? I don't know where your address is. Never mind. And then the check sits there on my desk. And then eventually I get the address, and then I'm out of town when I get the address. And then I come back and the check's still there on the desk. And like a month later, like, where's my money, Nicole? I'm like, oh, I got to mail that. What's your address? And then I mail it, right? And people who are hesitant to ask that because they think I'm too busy, think they're going to offend me, should never hesitate to ask, where's my money? I'm just saying that on the podcast now. Something that really helped me with that is online banking and being able to schedule checks. Because once somebody's in the system, it's just like, pay them. And what I have started doing as best I can is the minute an invoice comes in and I see it, I try to pay it right away, because that way it's just paid. And I end up in that situation because I know that's not nice. But that, like, what's behind that for me as a creative is the finish it problem. It just hit boring, but it's not boring for you to get paid. So, that's important. And you think about the characteristics of a creative and why we're this way. It's like, we thrive when we're making something. We thrive when we're creating, and we suffer when we're not, and we're just tracking things endlessly the same day after day after day, unless that tracking supports creating something. Like tracking the results of my roasts. I track like how the roast goes each day for each kind of bean, because the process of roasting coffee is creative for me. And the analytical side of that's super interesting. And from day to day, like what impacts the bean is a little bit different. And so I have to track that so that then I know, oh, today it's one of those days the beans roast. They need more heat sooner to roast the way I want them to, or whatever it is. And I think I track that so analytically because it's part of the creative process of roasting beans. But thriving while creating doesn't always help when you just got to sit down and gronk out something, right? We are prone to starting multiple things at one time. We are prone to it. We may or may not finish them. Sometimes starting many things at one time is a really bad idea. Other times it can get you farther faster. And we either shift focus often, which means I'm not spending enough time paying attention to this thing that's more clerical in nature in business. Like 10 minutes wasn't enough. Okay, I'm on to something else. Or we get in a headspace where we concentrate on one thing and only that thing, and that's the only thing we can think about while we're creating that thing, and everything else can pound sand. Interestingly enough, when I get invested emotionally in financial reporting for tax preparation, I will reach a point where everything else but that project is nothing I want to do, and I can only think about the tax prep. And that's actually part of why tax prep is dangerous for me, is when I finally get myself to that headspace, then all the other things I'm supposed to do, like, finish the Self-Reliance Festival agenda, which I'm halfway through right now, which I'd like to have done today. It's going to be done tomorrow. Let's be real, because I jet out of here to choir. It's hard for me to concentrate on that because all I'm thinking about is tax preparation. Right? So that's another characteristic that creatives have. Sometimes we're like, we can't concentrate. And other times we're like, we're concentrating. And boy, are we concentrating well. And then creatives prefer to think about things outside the box. So, like, why do I have to code meals as meals every time and catering as catering every time? That's boring, right? I want to think about this a different way. And we don't really care about rules or procedures. We're busy, like, coming at things from an out-of-the-box place, to use a cliche term. And bookkeeping is all inside a box. It's a little narrow box. That's what it is. That being said, I really, really, really buy into the power of having things tied up in your business, particularly in the bookkeeping and finance area, and prepared well in advance so you know what's happening, so you can make better decisions for yourself, for your customers, and for the long term. So you know if you should buy the beans because they just dropped in price or not. So you know if you should buy the beans because there might be shortages coming, but you've managed to save enough money to buy double beans so that you don't have to worry about a shipping disruption, right? I think from a feedback and tracking standpoint, having those tools in place, even if it's hard, even if you don't wanna, is such an empowering thing that I love people who love to do that, who I can hire to do that for me. So here's some ways I've addressed this challenge in the past. And I'm coming at this from a couple of, I've had different life phases in different businesses I've run. And there was a glorious time where I had built the nonprofit to darn near $1 million in revenue a year. And that meant that I could afford to pay for the kind of support I look to build into Nicole Sauce Industries right now, which is once a month, I had to communicate what things were for on the expense side, right? And that list was created through the bookkeeper going through all of the charges. And you're like, having discipline about this on this account and that on that account is very important. I kept my receipts so I would know. And I could go through in 20 minutes, basically, and say, like, this was catering, this was meals, and it was related to that project or the other project. And then a lot of the things were automated because, as I said, the electric bill is the electric bill, and it codes itself the same way every month. My shipping fees for Hollow Roast Coffee, which are a good number, I think it was about 200 of the charges that I just coded today, I did 500 today, were from the same vendor for the same thing, and it was shipping. And because you could automate that in the system I played with, it was like all I had to do is say yep. And I'm pretty sure there's a way I could have said just like do them all this way, right? So I just think it's really important. And ways that I've addressed this, so that's one way, is I found somebody who loves it and outsourced it. But I've also had to make myself do it. So ways to address it. Let's start with the first one. I know that tracking details gives me good feedback, but I hates it. This is a mindset problem. My mind wasn't right when I said I hate tracking stuff. And if we go back to you are the story you tell yourself, if you are telling yourself every day that you hate tracking details in your business, then you are setting yourself up to fail at tracking details in your business. And what is a better choice is to focus in on the first part of that statement, which is, I know that tracking details gives me critical feedback on my business. Therefore, I'm going to do it. So stop telling yourself that you hate it. Start telling yourself you're going to do it, or ask yourself, how can I get this done? How can I set it up so it can be done? It's a mindset issue. And the only person who can fix a mindset issue is you. So then let's talk about the second thing. Bookkeeping and tax codes are freaking complex, unnecessarily so. And this impacts tracking systems, which leads to frustration for somebody who wants to go big picture to small picture, and the systems are all created to go small picture to big picture. So what I've done here is I've tried so many apps. And this is the part you've all been waiting for. What apps have you tried, Nicole? I tried Expensify. That worked for a while. I ended up for mileage tracking, with a book in my car that I got from Amazon for $11, where I just write it down with a pen, because that's what I'll actually do rather than having it in my phone. Other people will do it in their phone. Expensify is really good for taking pictures of your receipts as you go, and it will synchronize with accounts, and it can help you. It's a tool. It is not a bookkeeping tool, but you can import those into QuickBooks and into other places. So it can be something that works for you on the day-to-day and pairs with whatever your CPA or bookkeeper are working with. I've also tried QuickBooks, and it's a big deal that I fired QuickBooks, because I have used QuickBooks on and off since 1997 or 8. It's probably 1998. I mean, I see a picture of a QuickBooks 1998 box. This is back when you installed software on computers, and it was a very good system. And the reason I learned to use it is I worked at a startup company in software development, and one of the things I did, believe it or not, I was an administrative assistant. That's pretty funny, huh? I was entering invoices and then also coding expenses. And the piece I didn't use, which was separated from me, was all the payroll stuff that they did, because I wasn't supposed to know what everybody made in the company, right? But I was doing that sort of bonehead work of, and it's not really bonehead work, but it kind of was at that company, of making sure expenses were coded right. And then that would go to the people who were above my pay grade, who could analyze and verify that it was right, and then use that to make awesome reports. So I used that tool. And it was great, because you could invoice customers, and you could charge them late fees if they didn't pay. And it sort of tracked all of that for you. And that was really nice too. And you could zero stuff out. And understand, I'm not going to be going to, I see software as a service business model as the devil. And that's where we've all moved to, right? Is subscription-based services. I have not interacted much in SAS or Oracle or any of the bigger large business systems. And some people suggested I get some of those this time, and I'm just not, my business is not at that scale yet. Those things are expensive. They can be customized to you. By the time you're using that kind of software, you probably also have people who maybe one step closer is equipped and specializing in bookkeeping capacities, and they have a much better breadth of knowledge than I do. And they're suited towards using those kinds of software, because that's who those pieces of software are written for. So then I used an Uber spreadsheet. And by that, I mean, I just set up a spreadsheet where the front tab calculates totals by category. And then I had each bank account on another tab, so I could go through and code which expenses were which, and then verify when I transferred from one account to another, which means if you use a credit card in business and then you pay it with your checking account, that's a transfer, right? It's not an expense. The expenses are tracked by the thing I bought in the credit cards, and then moving money to pay the credit card off is a transfer. So I could verify those transfers all happened the way I thought they should have. And I would import all of my expenses. And the good thing about the world is that most of my bank accounts and or credit card processors allow me to export a whole year at a time and to bring them in. And then I would spend a grueling 3 to 4 weeks every spare moment going through each expense and double checking that it was what I thought it was. Like, this involves me going, when for all Amazon orders, I have to go into Amazon and look at, like, what did I buy? Do I have a receipt for that? For all the Walmart orders, I have to go in and say, okay, what is this? Like, I have to do the paper receipt thing. So there was a lot. And that was the problem I was trying to start at the beginning of this year when I went to QuickBooks Online. Well, QuickBooks Online is a different animal than QuickBooks on the desktop. And QuickBooks on Mac is just, don't even bother. But if you're going to do QuickBooks, you're going to be getting a PC to do it with. And it just did not work right. Like, the synchronizing with my, like, so Expensify. I can say, hey, Expensify, synchronize with XYZ credit card, synchronize with this bank. It logs into my online banking system. It brings everything in, and then I can code it. QuickBooks can't manage to keep their poop together on that. Like, they can do some systems and not others. They don't support Stripe. I think they don't support Stripe. Stripe is the credit card processor I use at HoloRoast. Like, that's thousands of transactions, thousands that I would have to manually import. Not going to do it. And then I tried FreshBooks, and FreshBooks was not complex enough. So FreshBooks, the problem is I do have one bank account that does have to be manually imported because FreshBooks wouldn't speak with it. So then I'm like, well, how do I do that? And it's like, well, you just import a statement. And I'm like, I don't need all my banks like all on top of each other. I need them separated by bank. So it's clear to me, like, this is the credit card, this is the bank account, this is the credit card processor, right? I need those things to be clearly delineated in the system. And so finally, after spending, I don't know, half the day trying to make FreshBooks work, I walked away and I was like, well, that's not working. And the Uber spreadsheet is my next choice. And so then I tried Xero, Xero, which I had tried before. And the problem with Xero is I have 3 Stripe accounts for 3 different websites, and it could only do one. They fixed that. Now they can do multiple Stripe accounts. So that's pretty cool. And I went in and I started setting Xero up, and it has changed a lot since last time I used it. And so now I am about 3 days in on using Xero. And because the person who set up my QuickBooks earlier this year did a really good job of doing my expense accounts, I'm able to use what she did in Xero, which is nice. And I'm sure when my bookkeeper goes through, because I have a bookkeeper to work with now, when she goes through it, she'll want to adjust some things, but I can at least get the base level communication in about what each expense is for. So those are the tools I've tried. Right now, as a creative, I am relating to Xero best, in part because of the graphic design and in part because the automation is actually working. It's actually working, and it's separated enough that it's not just one big jumbled mess. In order for it to work for me, though, guys, I had to understand a little bit about bookkeeping. I had to understand that what an expense is and the difference between cost of goods sold and like tracking a meals expenditure, for example, and that's important. And I had to identify, because it makes like your own codes for you based on your industry, which is something I wish it didn't do, because my industry is like, there is no template for what I do right now. That might change after Matthew takes a look at how we track stuff and what we're doing and suggests how I should structure myself in the future. But it's still not perfect. And knowing that I have to depreciate something, for example, I haven't even figured out how to enter that stuff in there. And what's going to happen is the bookkeeper is going to get like, here's the expense tracking, here's the list of depreciation stuff, make that work. And I might figure out how to do that in Xero for 2023 if I stick with Xero. I think I'm probably sticking with them at this point because I've invested enough that it's working well, and I think that's pretty cool. But the key to this is once Xero is done, bookkeeping and tax codes are freaking complex. And I'm not a bookkeeper, a CPA, or a tax lawyer. And so my next step is outsourcing some of this. So I did structure my business the way it is now with the advice of somebody. And it has grown since that time. And it's time to get more advice. And it's probably time for me to have somebody doing the bookkeeping for me. and I need to find out how much that costs. And, like as we talked about last week on the live stream with John Willis, is figure out how many more hours I'm working to pay that person, because if they're on it all the time, I'm going to have that important tool to assess the health of my business. And I will have my stuff ready for taxes and tracked the way it needs to be, so that there's no question about it, right? And I mean, I'm confident that we're tracking well, but I'm also confident I am missing tax write-offs. And I want to know what those are. And I want to take full advantage of my ability to take advantage of the tax code to move my business ahead. So, third problem, the bookkeeping and finance industry has no motivation to make this easy for us. This is a mindset issue as well. You have found your why when you acknowledge that having stuff like this up to date, whether you're using an Uber spreadsheet or a software package, when you've acknowledged it's an important tool for your business and you find your motivation to do it. So then when you jump into using a program like Xero that is designed for people who are not like you, because it's designed for people who are not like you, if you're a creative, don't let that paralyze you. This is the time to make your peppermint tea, sit down, watch the tutorial videos, slow the heck down, and do it right. And don't make things up as you go. And as a Gen Xer, I am like accustomed to interfacing with software in such a way that I just make things up and try it until I figure it out. Well, this can make you a big mess in the bookkeeping software. So like yesterday, when I realized that there was no expense category for postage, I went out and I researched, like, do I need an expense category for postage, or is it just a random cost of goods sold? What is this? There's actually justification for calling it cost of goods sold in the case of most of my postage. And I went out and I made a decision, and I am tracking it that way 100% of the time for 2022. I am writing the question down for my bookkeeper and my CPA, and I'm going to say, this is how I'm tracking that. Is that how I should be tracking it? This is how postage is used. What do you say? And then I created an expense code for it in the chart of accounts. And that's me operating on a detail level that I don't usually operate on, and taking the time and not being in a hurry, which all of those things is a creative. It's like the creative had to put her brakes on, put on her big girl pants, and figure it out. And because I'm motivated to have this fixed forever, and because I'm motivated by the power I know it will give me to break out of sort of the cap I keep running into with my businesses, I'm just going to push through. I'm just going to I found my why. I'm not going to let it paralyze me. And when I run into a big roadblock, I have people I can reach out to ask. And ultimately, we are moving towards outsourcing a lot of this in my particular situation. And then the last problem being the challenge of finish. And this is why. So finishing, especially in clerical, it's really easy for me to put it off because I don't like to do it. I mean, see, there's a mindset thing again. Not finishing is because I'm not prioritizing it. And it is a priority, so I need to change it, right? And I'm writing a book called My 3 Things, which is all about how to set your life strategic plan, how to figure out 3 areas of focus, how to set goals related to that, and break that into a daily reminder of what your do or die items are. And the cool things about like the whole My 3 Things process is it works really well with creatives and ADHD people. It does. And it works with analytical people. And I have both of those kinds of people using it right now in our mastermind group, every day, giving me feedback from time to time. Something, though, that's really cool about My 3 Things is that before my daily planning method has been My 3 Things for 20 years, at least, maybe 25. And the life strategic plan thing was a totally separate thing I did. These 2 things were not together. And then I realized one day, these 2 things go together. But I had used My 3 Things as a daily planning method for 20 or 25 years before I realized that. And because of that, I got to really pressure test it at the level of how can I use this to make change in my life? And one of the things that My Three Things is really good at is breaking big projects down into bite-sized chunks. So you do a little bit every day, and next thing you know, it's 6 months later and you've accomplished great things, right? But another thing it's really good at is fixing mindset problems. Like, you can use it as a daily reminder to have a better attitude about bookkeeping for a month. And then hopefully you've faked it until you made it. At that point, you've changed the narrative you're telling yourself so that you have a different perspective, so it's easier to motivate. Well, here's the challenge of finish. If something stays on My Three Things for more than a day or two, you need to ask yourself the question, am I not doing it for some reason because I don't need to? Or is this now falling under the category of something that I have a perspective problem on or an attitude problem about wrong, and I just need to do the thing I don't want to do first tomorrow so that the thing is done? And we call it eating a frog. And there's a book called Eat That Frog that comes from. So is it a frog? Have I turned this into a frog and it's time to eat the frog with My Three Things? I find the method really helpful on the finish issue because, like, yesterday when I was like, all of these things need to be finished, well, I was like, okay, well, My Three Things is finish, one at a time until I'm out of time to finish, and eat the frog and be done with it. And then when I go into Monday, I won't be completely drowning in unfinished projects, right? So those are ways that I have addressed the creative challenges in my business. And I think in summary, there are some great things you can do as a creative running a business. Well, a lot of people running businesses are creatives, by the way, because creatives are really good at getting stuff started. We just sometimes don't finish. We sometimes start lots of things at one time, right? If you know what your weakness is, you can hire to your weakness or outsource to your weakness. That's why I'm talking about having somebody do this on a monthly basis for me long term and figuring out what that will take and earning the money to do it, because I really want the power of those reports. I really do, right? And my choice is I do it or I have somebody else do it. And there are people out there who love doing it. They love it. So why not take some of my money that I've earned doing things I love and pay them to do something they love? It's like a win-win situation. If you have noticed that Self-Reliance Festival's marketing schedule has been very, very consistent for the last 6 weeks or so, it's because there's somebody who really loves being consistent doing that. And it's not me, right? Many of you know who she is, and because she's talked about it, but she's doing a great job. And she's doing, like, that's an example of outsourcing to my weakness. I do not love posting to social media on a schedule, the same schedule every Monday through Friday. I do not love it. And you can there are tools for scheduling that, but I still don't love it. So I found somebody who does, right? And I'm giving them some money to do it. I can help come up with ideas. I am scheduling out some things. I'm creating content for it. Yeah, somebody wrote in the comments who it is. That's right. But she loves it. Why shouldn't I pay her to do that? I think it's a win-win for both of us. That's a best strategy you can use if you're earning enough in your business to do it. And if you're not, then you start asking yourself, how can I? Because the minute you can get rid of the things you hate off your to-do list, excuse my attitude problem, the minute you can get those off your to-do list, the more you can focus on just growing the crap out of your business and making it awesome and doing the best you can do in that regard. Changing your perspective, that's the second thing. So, like, 1, outsource if you can. 2, change your perspective and invest time in tracking what's important for your business so that you can have that future to outsource it, so that you have the future success, so that you're able to create more. Because if you don't do that and you fail, you may have to actually go back to the kind of job that you don't really want to be doing. And then I would say integrate My Three Things into your life. Start doing it. Even if you don't do the whole method right now, even if you just every day, up to 3, no more than 3, it's okay to have one do or die item that's moving you forward. Even if that item is go to work and do a good job at work so I can earn the money so I have the weekend off to move myself forward. Don't care what it is. Declare publicly up to 3 things that you're going to do that are important. Do or die, going to get done no matter what. And then at the end of the day, say, did I do those things? And if you didn't, start making adjustments as you go. So to my creative listeners, I don't know if this resonates with you or not. I'd love to hear, but I want to know this too. What do you do to handle your creative challenges in your business? What have I missed? What can we tell people to also try? Because I know with creatives, we're trying lots of different things. And I think it's really important to handle these details, even if emotionally I'm not always on board with it. And that's why I'm investing time in it. If without the My Three Things method, I probably wouldn't be investing time in it, but it's like, it's right there on My Three Things. Like, at least half an hour every day will be spent on this until I have a system in place that works. And that's getting it done. It's getting it done. I really think that both kinds of people are important, and I'm sure there are other like areas of gray in there, but like your creatives and your analyticals, both kinds of people, when we work together, really good at achieving great things together. But both sides have to look at it from how the other person sees it to achieve that greatness, right? Because if your perspective is, I don't know why that person can't just code their stupid stuff, that's not a good attitude to have either, right? You want to tap into the fact that they're seeing big picture first and then details. They want to tap into the fact that you're seeing details and then big picture. And when we are able to do that together, man, sky's the limit. So if you're hearing this and you're like, oh, my stuff isn't in order, it's time, guys. Go out and find the system that works for you, whether it's a spreadsheet, whether it's FreshBooks or Xero or Expensify or QuickBooks or any of the other like myriad of tools that exist to help with your tracking. And then ask yourself in a couple of months, did this help or hurt? And if it hurt, shift fire, find the thing that works. And if it helped, do more of that. I'll continue to share my experiences with the tools I'm trying, just so you know what I'm experiencing as part of that. And I hope that this show has helped motivate you to, creatives, tell yourself a different story. With that, if you like the show and want to support the work I'm doing here, you can do it in two ways. One, get your coffee at hollowroast.com. Two, consider becoming a member. You can go over to livingfreeintennessee.com to find out more. With that, guys, go out, make it a great week.